Some photographs from the Wild West were never meant to be seen, hidden away, because they exposed the most brutal, bizarre, and downright unbelievable sides of frontier life. Today, you're going to see them all. In the West, some professions were dangerous, controversial, and yet essential for survival. These women were sex workers in the Wild West, photographed in Alaska during the 1890s. With so few women living in many frontier regions, prostitution became a booming trade. In certain settlements, the number of prostitutes was as much as 25 times greater than that of other women. In Jerome, Arizona during the late 1800s, sex work was an unavoidable part of the mining boom town. As miners poured into the area, brothels sprang up to meet demand, and the women who worked there often endured rough, dangerous conditions. Their earnings played a significant role in keeping Jerome's economy alive, yet they lived under constant stigma and threat of violence. Despite their presence, their lives were largely left out of the official record.
But not all stories from the frontier were about economic survival. Some were about resilience in the face of tragedy. In 1851, 14-year-old Olive Oddman's family was ambushed by Native Americans in what is now Arizona. Her parents were killed in the attack, but Olive and her sister were spared and later sold to the Mojave tribe. After 5 years in captivity, Olive was returned to white society, permanently marked by the blue tattoos the Mojave had placed on her chin. Tragically, her sister did not survive, dying of starvation while still in captivity.
Medicine and spirituality often went hand in hand. Medicine men and women held a place of high honor in Native American culture, serving as healers and spiritual guides. This Eskimo medicine man, photographed in the 1890s by Frank G. Carpenter, was reportedly performing a ritual intended to drive evil spirits away from a sick child in Alaska. Among the Apache, one of the ceremonial garments worn by spirit dancers is both elaborate and symbolic. These dramatic costumes and towering headpieces are part of performances used for storytelling and healing, linking the dancers to the mountain spirits. Every outfit, headdress, and movement carries deep meaning. This photograph was taken in 1887, yet the tradition lives on today. But life in the West wasn't just shaped by culture and ceremony. Laws and morality often clashed in surprising ways. During the 1800s, prostitution was legal in Arizona and several other states. The Arizona government even profited from brothels, collecting money through licensing, taxes, and fines tied to the sex trade.
And sometimes, survival meant becoming part of the very culture you were taken from. Santiago Jimmy McKinn was only 12 years old when he was captured by Chiricahua Apache under the leadership of Geronimo in lower Mimbres Valley, New Mexico. His brother was killed, but Jimmy grew attached to his captors, eventually becoming a war chief within Geronimo's band.
Sandstorms were a frequent and dangerous part of life in the Old West.
This image, taken in Midland, Texas in 1884, shows a towering wall of sand advancing on the town. Along with tornadoes and hurricanes, these storms made traveling across the West a constant gamble. Not all frontier legends were outlaws by choice. Some were made by false accusations. Ned Christie, a Cherokee statesman, was accused of killing a U.S. Marshal in 1887. The events that followed became known as Ned Christie's War. After years of fierce resistance, Christie was eventually killed by lawmen. In 1918, testimony surfaced proving he had been falsely accused. But in the West, women too had to be ready to fight for their lives.
In the Old West, many women were forced to arm themselves for protection. Female outlaws, such as Big Nose Kate, the companion of Doc Holliday, were not unusual. Kate became notorious for setting fire to a jail in order to free Holliday, showing that grit was essential for survival in that era. After her attempts to earn a living through mining failed, Canadian-born Pearl Hart turned to crime, holding up a stagecoach to support her gravely ill mother. She disguised herself by cutting her hair short and wearing men's clothes. When captured, she was sentenced to 5 years in prison, but was released after serving 3.
Rose Dunn, remembered as the Rose of Cimarron, fell in love with outlaw George Bitter Creek Newcomb after meeting him through her brothers. But the relationship ended violently. Her brothers later killed Newcomb to collect the bounty on him. Some images from the Old West are so strange, they raise more questions than answers. This unsettling 19th century photograph isn't from a horror film or a game. It's authentic. It leaves more questions than answers. Why is the young girl wearing a mask? Who stands behind her? And why do her legs seem to be missing? The mystery has never been solved.
The Rufus Buck Gang, made up of Creek Indians and African Americans, was a short-lived but vicious group, responsible for multiple killings, including the deaths of U.S. Deputy Marshal John Garrett and at least 2 women. They were eventually captured by Creek Light Horse Police and executed by hanging on July 1st, 1896 in Fort Smith. William T. Anderson, infamously known as Bloody Bill, was among the most feared Confederate guerrilla leaders during the Civil War. The killing of his father by a Union soldier fueled his deep hatred of the Union, leading him to become a merciless figure. He commanded Quantrill's Raiders, a gang infamous
synonymous for brutal assaults. The term Buffalo Soldier, popularized in a Bob Marley song, was first used by Native Americans to describe black cavalry units during the Indian Wars. Over time, it came to represent all African American regiments formed in 1866. Remarkably, 23 Buffalo Soldiers were awarded the Medal of Honor for acts of bravery in these conflicts. Buffalo Bill's Wild West show became famous for its displays of cowboys and staged gunfights. Only the most skilled marksmen could join, with performers including Johnny Baker, Coyote Bill, Jess Willard, and legendary sharpshooter Annie Oakley. This 1889 photograph shows the inside of the Table Bluff Hotel and Saloon in Humboldt County, California. Built in 1852 by Van German, it was operated for many years by Seth Kinman, a well-known entertainer who once performed for President Lincoln using a fiddle he had crafted from muleskin.
Some women of the West became legends, not for their virtue, but for the company they kept. Laura Bullion, often called the Rose of the Wild Bunch, learned the outlaw life from her bank robber father. Known for her rugged looks and romantic connections to multiple members of the Wild Bunch gang, she eventually served a prison sentence. After her release, she left crime behind, settled in Memphis, and worked various jobs until her death in 1961. But beyond the saloons and shootouts, the West was also home to thriving native cultures, whose traditions shaped the land. The Sioux Nation, made up of the Eastern Dakota, Western Dakota, and Lakota, is among the largest and most famous tribes of the Great Plains. This photograph captures their teepees scattered across the land. Designed for mobility, these shelters kept the interior cool during the summer and warm in the winter, perfectly matching their nomadic way of life. Kramer's Saloon in Monroe County, Michigan, bears a striking resemblance to a modern bar, but the beer it served was far different. Without refrigeration or pasteurization, beer stayed at about 55 to 65 degrees and had to be drunk quickly before it went flat. Some photos mark the end of one chapter in Western history and the forced beginning of another. This 1886 image, taken in the Nueces River, Texas, shows Apaches awaiting transport into exile by train after surrendering to General Miles. Even after being forced from their lands, the Apache continued their struggle for rights and freedom.
In the late 19th century, prospecting for gold, silver, or copper was a tempting route to fortune. While mine owners reaped the largest rewards, individual miners could still hit a lucky strike. However, with only primitive tools at their disposal, the odds of striking it rich were extremely low. A rare photograph of Jesse James, taken on July 10, 1864, in his Missouri hometown, shows the outlaw at just 16 years old. James remains one of the most enduring figures of the Old West, his life retold countless times, often with heavy embellishment. Belle Starr, one of the West's most infamous female outlaws, was linked to the James Younger gang and several other criminals. She was gunned down in 1889, and Edgar Watson was executed for her murder, though conflicting stories have left the true circumstances a mystery. James Butler Wild Bill Hickok, celebrated as one of the fastest guns in the West, claimed to have killed more than 100 men, a number historians now believe was closer to 6 or 7. He met his end in 1876, shot during a poker game. Some leaders became symbols of resistance, refusing to surrender their people's independence without a fight. Geronimo, a prominent leader and medicine man of the Badonko Apache, became famous for rallying multiple tribes against both U.S. and Mexican forces. After years of resistance, he was captured and died as a prisoner of war in 1909. Wyatt Earp, shown here with friend Bat Masterson, is immortalized for his role in the gunfight at the OK Corral, where he, brothers Morgan and Virgil, and Doc Holliday faced off against 4 outlaws. Masterson, meanwhile, took part in the Second Battle of Adobe Walls, where buffalo hunters repelled a massive attack by Comanche and Kiowa warriors. The camera was still a marvel of modern technology in the Old West, and many cowboys wanted their moment in front of the lens. In the Old West, photography was still a new and exclusive technology, and cowboys often posed proudly for portraits, showing off their firearms. Although the frontier is remembered for its lawlessness, gun regulations did exist, and not everyone had the legal right to carry a weapon. Amber-type photography, which emerged in the early 1850s, was among the first practical photographic methods. It was quick, inexpensive, and produced sharp images, making it widely popular for roughly a decade before being replaced by the tintype process. Even the most feared outlaws had lives beyond their criminal fame. Jesse James was more than a notorious outlaw. He was also a husband and father. This photograph shows his children, Jesse James Jr. and Mary Susan James, who were born in Nashville, Tennessee under the aliases Tim and Mary Howard. Both were present when their father
father was killed by Bob Ford in 1882.
Two Oglala Lakota men, Elk and Black Elk, were featured performers in Buffalo Bill's Wild West show, known for their lively dances, adorned with shells and bells. After touring Europe in 1888, Black Elk and three companions missed their return ship to America and spent 2 additional years traveling with another performance troupe. A 19th century Kansas City newspaper featured this man, dressed in classic frontier attire, including a Mexican sombrero. These wide-brim hats were practical for harsh weather, and later inspired the design of the iconic 10-gallon cowboy hat. Kit Carson, a celebrated frontiersman, played a major role in opening up California. At 16, he became a mountain man and trapper, taking part in numerous expeditions throughout the Rockies. His adventurous stories encouraged many settlers to head west. Carson fathered 10 children, with 3 wives, before dying of an aortic aneurysm in 1868. General George Custer, a Civil War and Indian Wars veteran, is remembered for his death at the Battle of the Little Bighorn, where his force of about 600 was overwhelmed by some 3,500 native warriors in a swift, decisive defeat. Some photographers braved great dangers to document the rapidly changing frontier. Photographer John Grail chronicled the American frontier during the late 1800s, capturing the West's rapid transformation. His career ended tragically when he died of mercury poisoning after working in the mines. Travel across the Wild West was often treacherous. Wealthy travelers sometimes hired armed escorts to guard them along risky routes, like the Sierra Nevada Mountain Trail, which played a vital role in America's push westward. Terry's Texas Rangers, one of the Confederacy's most effective cavalry units during the Civil War, fought in over 275 engagements across 7 states. Founded in 1861, the regiment surrendered on April 26, 1865, disbanding with the rest of the Army of Tennessee. For many, the journey west was as grueling as the life that awaited them. This photograph captures a couple resting in Kansas during their westward journey. Migration has long been a defining element of American history, especially during the Great Push toward the frontier. Despite the West's rugged and often intimidating reputation, millions made the trip in search of new opportunities and a better life.
Here we see Charlie Nebo, a genuine cowboy, pictured with his companion, Nicholas Janis. Nebo led a modest life on the frontier, avoiding self-promotion or exaggeration of his deeds. A handwritten note on the image reads, "The genuine cowboy captured alive." Entertainment in the West could be grand, but even the greatest shows eventually came to an end. At the height of its popularity, Buffalo Bill's Wild West show staged its most spectacular performance at the Chicago World's Fair, entertaining a crowd of roughly 18,000 people. The success didn't last. Financial hardship during the Great Depression led to the show's closure in 1913, when owner William Cody declared bankruptcy. Beller, a well-known female outlaw, drew attention after marrying Cherokee Sam Starr and becoming involved in horse theft and bootlegging. Arrested in 1883 for stealing horses, she would later be killed by gunfire. In the 19th century frontier, gambling was more than simple entertainment. It was ingrained in daily life. It's no surprise that gambling halls were among the first buildings in new towns. One bluff-based card game from this era eventually evolved into modern American poker. Spotted Elk, also called Bigfoot, was a respected leader of the Minikiu Lakota people. His nickname was given by a U.S. Army soldier stationed at Fort Bennet. Tragically, he was among the 152 who lost their lives in the Wounded Knee Massacre of 1890. Even in boomtowns, nightlife evolved quickly, from simple gatherings to lavish affairs. During the early years of the California Gold Rush, dance halls were small, makeshift gatherings, often set up in tents. By the 1880s, they had become lavish, elegant venues. This 1909 photograph from Seattle shows women in high fashion, standing outside the Klondike Dance Hall and Saloon. My man, a Mojave Native American, served as a guide and interpreter in Colorado during the 1870s, working with photographer Timothy O'Sullivan. The two captured striking images of the frontier, which O'Sullivan later used to entice settlers westward. Death Valley, one of the planet's hottest locations, got its grim name during the California Gold Rush, after 13 pioneers perished attempting to cross it. The region has recorded temperatures as high as 134 degrees Fahrenheit. Taken in 1873, near Fort Defiance, New Mexico, this photograph shows Navajo people who had been displaced during the long walk to Bosar Redondo. The forced relocation deeply shaped the Navajo identity for generations to come.
A 1905 image from Encinal, Texas, depicts men hauling water through the countryside, with mules providing the muscle. In the Old West, mules were an indispensable means of transportation and labor.
Some western towns rose overnight in a frenzy of mining, only to vanish just as quickly. Eureka, Utah was established in 1870, following the discovery of silver and other valuable ores. At its height, it ranked as the 9th largest city in the state, with about 3,900 residents. When the mine closed, the population dwindled, and by 1957, Eureka had become a ghost town. During long cattle drives, which could stretch up to 3 months, cowboys had little opportunity to bathe. Poor hygiene often led to sickness, and many died from illnesses that might have been preventable. Photography was still an expensive novelty in the Old West, making it difficult to record daily life. Timothy O'Sullivan, one of the period's most notable photographers, traveled with a portable darkroom, hauled by 4 mules through Nevada's Carson Sink. A 1902 photograph from Jennings, Kansas, shows a cowboy driving cattle with his lasso ready. Despite romanticized portrayals, cowboy life was grueling, demanding months of hard travel with minimal rest. This 1871 image from San Bernardino, California, features correspondent Fred W. Luring posing beside his mule. That same year, he released both a novel and a collection of poems, but was killed shortly after in an attack by native warriors. In Anadarko, Oklahoma, in 1901, crowds gathered to bid on land at auction. For many settlers, land ownership was the driving force behind moving west, fueling the region's rapid growth. A 1905 image captures a saloon along the dusty main street of Hazen, Nevada, a classic Old West landmark. While saloons are a staple of Western films, they were equally prominent in reality. The first opened in Wyoming in 1822 to serve fur trappers, but they soon spread across the frontier. Many became more than drinking establishments, doubling as gambling halls, brothels, and sometimes opium dens. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, a supposed tradition claimed that on December 31st, wives would kneel before their husbands and apologize for their mistakes over the past year. Whether true or not is uncertain, but this story has often been linked to the photo in question. This 1905 photograph from Encinal, Texas, shows the first house built in Dodge City back in 1872. Dodge City went on to become one of the West's most legendary cowtowns, frequented by well-known figures such as Wyatt Earp and Doc Holliday.
This photograph features Bill Doolin, a notorious outlaw and leader of the Doolin-Dalton gang, infamous for bank and train robberies. His criminal career ended when U.S. Marshal Heck Thomas shot and killed him on August 24, 1896. In the Old West, even in death, an outlaw's image could serve a purpose. Law enforcement of the Old West often photographed outlaws after death, as both proof of their demise and a warning to others. This remains one of the most iconic images from the period. A 1910 photograph of a young girl feeding chickens in Sun River, Montana, reflects the deep isolation settlers experienced on the Great Plains. Neighbors were often 160 acres or more apart, and with little means of communication, farm life could be extremely lonely. This 1876 image depicts Deadwood, Dakota, one of the most famous gold rush towns. The California Gold Rush began in 1848 when James W. Marshall discovered gold at Sutter's Mill in Coloma. Word traveled fast, drawing roughly 300,000 fortune seekers. The population boom helped California achieve statehood in 1850, becoming the nation's 31st state. If you enjoyed this journey through remarkable moments in history, be sure to subscribe and share your thoughts in the comments. I'll see you in the next adventure.